Thanks for tuning in to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us. Now, Brian, we're at the end of the field, and this year, I got to tell you, there's a lot of fields out there that the ends of the field look terrible because guys had issues with tank cleanout, and every time they turned around, they had some burn on the crop. We're going to talk through those tank cleanout issues so you don't have to have any problems going forward.
Well, one of the issues is we've been out in fields just lately here is because of the dry weather, we're seeing a pest that we don't see every year in this part of the country, and that is spider mites. We're going to discuss how you even scout for spider mites, what the thresholds are, and what products you need to use on your farm to clean them up.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about the other pest that we don't see very often. It's our weed of the week, Brian. This one could be a disaster across our country. No, I'm just teasing. But it is a very important weed of the week, and we'll show you how to control this tough weed. But first, here's today's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
It's Farm Basics time, where we talk about something that is common for Darren and me as farmers, but if you're a non-farmer, you may not have ever even thought about this before. And what our topic is today is re-entry intervals. Where does that show up, and why does it come into play for us as farmers?
Well, okay, when we talk about re-entry interval, what that means is when you treat your crop with some type of pesticide, each one of them has a re-entry interval. Now, some of them are safe enough that you can spray it and pretty much walk right back out into the field. And other ones, you spray it and you may have to wait a couple days before it's real safe to go back out in the field. You know, these are things that are very important, especially if you've got other people working on your farm or neighbors or whatnot that you have to communicate with. Like, for example, for our farm, Brad and I both have little kids. And if we're going to spray something that may be a little on the harsh side, like let's say, for example, we're going to spray Lorsban insecticide instead of using a pyrethroid. Lorsban is an organophosphate. It's got a pretty good smell to it, which just for the smell alone, you may not want to walk right back out into something that's just been treated, but you've actually got to wait for a little bit before you can go back out in the field. Now, when we're going to do that, we keep in mind, hey, we've got kids too. And you know what? We don't want to go play in the wheat field tonight because we sprayed Lorsban today and we've got a re-entry interval. And so we've got to communicate those things. Or let's just say that you've got other farm workers. Maybe you've got some migrant workers on your farm. And if you're going to spray a pesticide out there, you need to make sure everybody's informed that, hey, there's a re-entry interval with what we just put out. We can't go back in that field for a day or 2 days or whatever the re-entry interval is, just to make sure everybody's safe.
Where this appears is on the ag chemical label that has been approved by the EPA. So you can go right to cdms.net, for example, and look up the label of any pesticide that there is in the country. And right on that label, it will say re-entry interval. And it could vary depending on certain crops, so you have to check the label. Now, one of the things, if you are a private applicator or a commercial applicator, if there is going to be someone else on your farm, you have to notify them. So that is a requirement. It's part of this whole re-entry interval thing. And in some cases, it might be a week's re-entry interval. You may need to flag that field just so people absolutely know, hey, I'm not supposed to be going out in there again.
Well, we see this a lot, like in seed corn production. Maybe they're using some product out there that you can't go back in the field for a few days. They'll actually post signs at the field entrances. So if there are any migrant workers, if there are some summer help that may be coming out into the fields, that kind of thing, or even a crop scout. They just know, hey, this got sprayed on this date, here's when it's safe to go back in, and that way you never have to enter the field and figure out, oh boy, something's weird out in this field, something doesn't smell right or feel right.
So one last question about this. How do they determine a re-entry interval? How do they know it's 24 hours versus, let's say, 72 hours?
Well, it all depends on the testing that they want to do. And when we're talking about getting a label through the EPA, well, all those chemical companies have to provide a tremendous amount of data at the cost of the chemical company to our EPA for them to review. So let's just say that you're spraying a product in food production and you say, wow, I'm going to spray this, we're going to need to harvest the next day. Well, you're going to have to, as a chemical company, prove that it's safe for your workers to be out there within 24 hours. And maybe you say, you know, I really have to prove it's going to be safe to be out there, you know, within a couple of hours as soon as that product's dry. Well, that's fine, but you're just going to have to do that much more testing to make that happen.
Yeah, and that may cost millions of dollars for that ag chemical company. So a lot of people will complain that, oh boy, these pesticides are so high priced. Well, you know what? A lot of that cost comes because of the EPA. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily. I'm just saying it is what it is. And if they have to spend all this money to prove a re-entry interval and a pre-harvest interval and that it's safe to even use on certain crops, it just costs millions and millions and millions of dollars. So they've got to get that money back somehow.
Well, and you say, oh, it's going to cost all this money and the products are going to cost more. Hey, I like our system that we've got in place. And could there be improvements? Certainly there could. But you compare this to any other country around the world, and you say, wow, would I really rather be in this third world country that doesn't have a regulatory process? No way. When you think about the safety for farmers and for non-farmers in our country, with the products that we're using, it's tremendous.
Well, safety is very important, but we also have to get great pest control, especially if you've got our Weed of the Week. We'll tell you how to stop it on your farm coming up later in the show.
Not a weed.
Hi!
It's our agriculture liquid sales professional. Brian's never really liked salesmen.
But I like him.
I heard you talking about testing products to make sure they work. You know, Agriculture Liquid Fertilizers does more research to prove our products than any other fertilizer company.
Yeah, I've seen your reports. There's a ton of proof.
We've been to the North Central Research Station. We've seen AgroLiquid's 500-acre proving ground up close and personal.
We know that when we use agriculture liquid fertilizers, it's like having all that research on our farm.
It's like having Dr. Jerry and the team right here in your field.
Dr. Who?
Find out how Dr. Jerry and his team can help you increase yields at www.farmguytv.com.
Hey, we have field days at the North Central Research Station in late summer. You're all invited.
Over the generations, fertilizer, the unsung hero of the farm, has been in the background, quietly nourishing crops with very little fanfare. Until now. Meet the next generation of fertilizer. Micro Essentials.
Speed, strength, and efficiency make Capello corn heads a head above the rest. Built with polymer components that exceed industry standards, Capello corn heads continue to push the boundaries for maximizing grain retention while using less energy. Visit CapelloUSA.com and learn more about Capello's state-of-the-art chopping technology that cuts cleaner, allowing your horsepower to remain where it belongs, with your combine, so you can harvest faster in all weather conditions. Add to that an amazing folding feature, and it's clear to see why Capello is a head above the rest.
Micronutrients are not optional for plants, they are essential. TJ Micromix is a profit-proven management tool that ensures the availability of essential secondary and micronutrients. Formulated as a dry granule or liquid, TJ Micromix is plant available, easy to mix and apply. The synergistic fertilizer mix delivers consistent yield response on a variety of crops by complementing an NPK fertilizer program. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your fertilizer dealer and get your TJ Micromix today.
All right, Brian, we're here at the end of the field, and wow, we've got this problem right in the field approach. And you know, in this case, it's probably compaction, but we do see this in a lot of fields across the country where it could actually be some herbicide injury killing off a little bit of the crop right in the field.
Well, you know it's a herbicide injury when it starts off bad and it gets better, and all of a sudden there's no problem. So with all these sprayers that are out there, we talk to farmers all the time about getting good spray tank clean out, and we want to run through with you today what our steps are for the right spray tank clean out. And you know what? There probably never is a 100% guarantee that, you know, every last little drop is out of there of any product you've used in the past. You just have to use your head, be very diligent when you are cleaning out spray tanks, but let's run through what we would recommend to a farmer.
Okay, well, first of all, why are we seeing more issues this year? It's because we're tank mixing in more products. Now, if you had Roundup resistant corn and Roundup resistant soybeans and that's all you're spraying and you're just spraying Roundup, yeah, maybe you got by for 10 years or even more with no issues whatsoever, and you say, wow, I never had an issue and this year I did. Well, guess what? Roundup isn't killing all the weeds anymore in most of our country. So guys are having to tank mix something else, and probably a pretty strong rate of something else, to pick up Roundup resistant mare's tail, or Roundup resistant giant ragweed, or Roundup resistant pigweed, something like that. So when we've got products like that that are very crop specific, where it's good to use in corn, but in soybeans it's going to hurt things. Well, those types of products need to be cleaned out well. That's why we're seeing more issues this year.
Okay, so one of the most important things you can do on your farm is try to drain your sprayer out completely every single night. The more you allow pesticides to sit in your spray tank overnight, especially if you have poly tanks and rubber hoses or any type of poly line that you've got, that's not good. Even spray nozzles I can think of that could be poly. So yes, if it was all stainless steel, you've got a lot less risk. And that may be something you might want to go to in the future too.
Okay, well there's a couple of things there, Brian. When you leave something sit overnight, or even for just a few hours unexpectedly, maybe you have a breakdown in the field and you have to go get some parts and all of a sudden it ends up being a 4 or 6 hour project, you know, you're going to have a couple of things. One, you're going to have some settling out. So you had a product like atrazine, for example, that you had mixed in. Now that atrazine settles out and you're going to have problems with it. Could cake up in certain spots or get to those small little hard to get to places. So that's going to be one thing. The other thing is maybe you're spraying for grass or volunteer corn and you're using a product like Select. Well, Select happens to be a fantastic tank cleaner, and you know what? So does Roundup. And when guys were out spraying for volunteer corn and their soybeans this year with Select and Roundup, all of a sudden we were pulling things out of the pores in that poly tank or out of that rubber hose. Now we've got some of our corn herbicides that we were applying a week ago. And guys said, well, wait a minute. Now, if that was going to happen, shouldn't it happen in my very first tank? No, not necessarily. We had a number of farmers this year that sprayed 1,000 or 2,000 acres of that, and it worked just fine. And then all of a sudden they had that breakdown, or they had that day that it got windy and they left a half a tank of spray sit for a day or two in your sprayer and it just started pulling things out.
Okay, so it's not just the pulling things out, it's also the fact that it can actually get into the pores. So if you do have the breakdown or you don't clean your spray tank out every night, then product is going to get into the pores of this poly, and eventually that's going to get sucked out by something else. So what we want it to get sucked out by is tank cleaner. So our suggestion for you, again, is make sure you're draining out your tank every night. If at all possible, we want to absolutely do that. Then in terms of how you're going to clean that tank out, we talk very often about triple rinsing. I think that's a great thing, but just make sure when you're actually triple rinsing, you're triple rinsing everything. In other words, when you've got that big poly tank, how about the top of that tank? I mean, not the outside, but the inside top of that tank. A lot of times ag chemicals will splash up there,
or there'll be foam, and that foam will stick on the top of the tank.
Yep, something will happen, but you've got to clean out there. You've got to clean out in the boom, maybe even the spray nozzles. I mean, you've got to really, really be thorough. Then the other thing that we like to do is let spray tank cleaner sit in the tank overnight. In other words, fill your tank completely up with water and spray tank cleaner and let that spray tank cleaner suck out anything that might be in the pores of that tank.
Okay, now when we talk about tank cleaner, one of the things that I like about, we use a product called Inside Out, but there's a number of good tank cleaners out there on the market. When we're using a tank cleaner, we want something that'll not only pull things out of those pores and clean that residue off the sides of the tank, but it's got to be able to keep it in solution. Because let's say you use household ammonia, for example. There's a lot of guys that say, oh, I'm just going to use some household ammonia. That's fine, and it does a nice job cutting stuff off the side of the tank. The problem is when you're using household ammonia, a lot of those chemicals you're mixing with are just going to sit on the top of the tank. It's going to float on the top, kind of like oil on water. And now when you drain that tank out, well, what happens to that oily residue? It just sits right back on the side of the tank again. So you need to use a tank cleaner that's going to keep that in solution. That way when you do cut it off the sides of the tank, you can actually get it out of the tank too.
So again, the most important thing is making sure you're triple rinsing, that you're using spray tank cleaner, that you let the spray tank cleaner sit there overnight, and every time you're spraying any products out, try to, if at all possible, drain your tank completely down so no herbicide, no pesticide whatsoever is sitting in that tank at all.
Okay, Brian, I've investigated a lot of these issues that happened to guys this summer, and many of them didn't happen in the tank, they happened in the boom. Guys would do a good job cleaning that tank out, but they'd forget about flushing out that boom. And even at the ends of the boom, what guys would forget about is, hey, you know what, my last nozzle is here, but a few inches over is the end of the boom. And there is a cap there that you can take off. And some of the guys, when they took that cap off, maybe they were spraying a Lotus or a Callisto or atrazine or one of these products in corn, and they took that end cap off finally, and they realized, oh man, there's a plug that's about like silly putty or something in the end of my boom that I just wasn't able to get out. And once I took that plug off, I could completely clean it out. And when you left some Roundup or one of these products in soybeans out there overnight, what was just eating away at that little plug of stuff at the end of the spray boom.
Let me give you one other example. I had a farmer who said, boy, I shouldn't have any problems. I've got a stainless steel tank. I said, yep, you do have a stainless steel tank. But are your lines stainless steel? No, they're rubber hose. Well, there you go. That's where your problem was. It's easy to clean out that stainless steel tank, but you got to be thinking the stainless steel tank, that's not it. You've still got pesticide in all that spray boom, in any hose that's going out there.
Around the tips, around the filters, all those things. I mean, it doesn't really take that much time to take it off. You say, oh man, it's going to take forever. No, it really doesn't take that much time, especially if you do it at the end of the day. You let stuff soak overnight and you're pretty good the next day.
And here's one other thing a lot of farmers are going to. A lot of guys have more and more acres all the time, like us on our farm. This year we used 2 different sprayers. We had one on beans, one on corn. You know what? We didn't have to clean out at all.
All right, Brian. Now you not only have to buy 1 sprayer, you have to buy 2 if you're going to farm Brian's way. This is going to get expensive.
Easier, though, Darren.
Well, you probably need 2 sprayers if you have our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
If you're a farmer or a rancher, I know you've worked darn hard at keeping that baby rolling. It's more than a balance sheet, it's a way of life. Hey, I'm Steve Azar and I wrote and recorded the song American Farmer. Do you know what the purpose of a farm estate plan is? It helps avoid or minimize federal estate taxes, and it helps preserve your wealth and pass the family farm on to the next generation. Call the good people at Swenson's. They care and they can help.
Everything is better to the power of Nutrisphere N. Proven to shield against leaching, volatilization, and denitrification, Nutrisphere N Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager helps you maximize the efficiency of your nitrogen applications. In fact, research shows that in 184 corn trials, Nutrisphere N increases yields by an average of 13.2 bushels per acre. Do the math for yourself. Contact your local fertilizer dealer today and take your operation to the power of Nutrisphere N.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
Just announced from Case IH and Titan Machinery. No payments or interest until January 2014 on most used combines model year 2003 and newer. This deal includes any 2003 or newer header purchased with the combine. Titan Machinery has the largest selection of quality pre-owned combines anywhere. Check out our website at titanmachinery.com and ask your rep about no payments or interest until 2014. Some restrictions apply. Offer ends August 31st. Titan Machinery and Case IH. Better solutions.
Back in 1966, Advanced Drainage Systems, Inc. was the first company to start manufacturing plastic agricultural drainage pipe in the United States. And today, ADS continues our leadership with superior pipe production and service capabilities. Our roots are firmly entrenched in the agriculture industry, and we're committed to helping farmers grow their business. With 54 manufacturing plants and 24 distribution yards throughout the world, you can count on ADS and our green striped pipe to be there when you need us. Advanced Drainage Systems, the green striped pipe you can count on.
Well, in a dry year, it seems like we have more spider mite issues. Why is that, Darren?
It was interesting. You know, this year they were showing up in June in some areas. I thought, wow, we're never that dry that early. Oh, I shouldn't say never, but I really can't remember being that dry that early. We were already seeing it in Iowa and Nebraska to our south. So guys in South Dakota where we farm are pretty nervous about it at that point. But really, when it gets really dry, when you think about spider mites, they have competition out there, but they also have disease.
And yeah, there is this fungus that gets on them in wetter conditions. So unfortunately, in dry years, the fungus doesn't get going and we have to spray for spider mites. As far as threshold goes, though, this is the big thing. You know, I've been scouting.
I was waiting to see what you were going to say on this one.
I've been scouting and looking for spider mites for the last 25 years, and nobody has any concrete threshold because you can't just go out and count, oh, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 aphids on that plant. I'm at this threshold. Well, if you're going to count spider mites, you got to have a magnifying glass, and it'd be very time consuming.
I think spider mites, when you talk about a threshold, if I'm seeing some in my field and I'm drought stressed, I'm going to do something about it.
There are many different types of spider mites. 2-spotted spider mites we'll see commonly around here, but there are several others. The big thing with spider mites is not all insecticides are going to control them. And in fact, some of them will actually, what they call, flare up spider mite outbreaks. For example, if you were to go out and use a pyrethroid, some of the best pyrethroids are Warrior, Silencer, Asana, Declare. They're fantastic at wiping out soybean aphids. The problem is they'll also kill some of the predators that could potentially eat the spider mites. So if there are no
beneficials
if there are no predators to kill the spider mites, then the spider mites can grow uninterrupted.
All right, but let's not lump all the pyrethroids together, because Capture is fantastic, does a great job on most bugs, and it also has some pretty good activity on spider mites.
Yep.
So Capture would be the pyrethroid of choice, and fortunately that's come way down in price versus just a few years ago, so it's actually pretty reasonable to use Capture. The other product that we like to use for mite flare-ups in our area is Lorsban. Lorsban's been a good one. We've counted on that for years. It's a different chemical family. It's an organophosphate, and for a lot of farmers, they say, well, you know what, I've been using pyrethroids. Maybe it's a good idea for me to rotate to an organophosphate now and again just to avoid any resistance potential.
Okay, with spider mites, I talked about how they are just about impossible to actually count the number of them. But you can see webbing out in your field. Once you get a lot of spider mites, you'll see it looks like some little spots on leaves, and you just have to do some further investigation.
Well, when you get drought conditions, you know, there are a lot of problems that happen out in your fields. One of the considerations that we get on our farm and many farms across the country when it's drier is you're going to have more spider mites compared to some of the other insects that are normally out in your field. You could get some of these mites that are out there that can definitely hurt things. There really aren't established thresholds, so you have to use your own judgment. If you think there are enough of them to justify treatment, Capture and Lorsban are the best options.
Well, Capture and Lorsban are great for spider mites, but unfortunately, they won't do a thing for our Weed of the Week. We'll tell you how to control it on your farm coming up next.
You know how stressful it is when guidance systems go down. You lose field time, you lose yield potential, you lose patience. Help is here. Raven Cruiser 2 RTK with Slingshot. Precision simplified. Learn more at ravensimple.com.
Our Weed of the Week is giant foxtail. How can we identify this thing?
You know what, Brian? Whenever you talk about the foxtail species, I say that to many farmers, and they say, oh, you mean pigeon grass? And they lump them all together. They say, oh, giant foxtail, yellow foxtail, green fox. I don't even know what the difference is. I just call them pigeon grass. I see them out in my field. They're annual grasses. And for the most part, similar products control all of them. Now, there are a few weaknesses here and there. But when it comes to giant foxtail, I'm typically looking at the upper side of the leaf blades, and you're going to see some hairs on there. And if you say, well, my eyes aren't that good anymore, how can I tell there are hairs there? Just run your finger backwards down that leaf. So instead of running it up the blade, kind of run it backwards down the blade, and you'll feel it kind of grab.
Yeah, but with the giant foxtail, I like to call it hairy foxtail because it's got a lot of hair all over. Yellow foxtail just has long tufts of hair right at the base of the leaf blade. Green foxtail, you'll have hair just on the upper side of the leaf blade. But giant foxtail, you can have hair just about everywhere, up and down the stem and the leaves.
All right, well, the good thing with foxtails is they're annual weeds, so we can typically control them fairly well. When we talk about corn, what are the best products?
Well, I would start with something like Harness, Surpass, Outlook, or Dual Down. Post-emerge, Roundup is not having any issues with giant foxtail, so make sure Roundup is in the tank, or Liberty if you're planting Liberty crops.
Okay, in soybeans, again, Roundup Ready soybeans and Liberty Link soybeans offer you good post-emerge options with the Roundup and the Liberty.
They do. We should say, though, with Roundup, it only takes a small amount of Roundup to control foxtail, giant foxtail. With Liberty, it definitely takes the full rate of Liberty.
Well,
make sure you're using
it's a
the full
contact
rate.
killer. It doesn't have that systemic action that you're going to get out of the Roundup. Now, when we look at the other products out there, starting with the pre-emerge, like a Treflan, Sonland, or Prowl, works very well in soybeans. And post-emerge, all of those products that do a nice job on volunteer corn, like Select Max, for example, will do a pretty good job on giant foxtail if you get it early. If you let this stuff get too big and tiller out, you're going to have a tough time getting it with those post-emerge volunteer corn grass killers. That's where Roundup and Liberty can really come in to help.
Yep, in wheat, our suggestion is put Prepare down pre-emerge, then follow post-emerge with Axial, or you could use Discover, Puma, or some other grass killer in wheat.
Well, giant foxtail is a big weed of the week, but you can get it under control on your farm. It's all time for this week's weed, but now Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH. The world of farming is changing. From the power and versatility of Steiger and Magnum tractors to the legendary reliability of Axial Flow combines, Case IH can help you be ready. To learn more, visit caseih.com/be ready.
Could we be heading back to 1970s equipment technology to solve our problems? In today's Iron Talk, we'll discuss something that you may have done back in the 70s and 80s that's coming back into favor. With Roundup-resistant weeds, everything's changed. Roundup no longer works, so we've got to use multiple products and some different cultural practices to control the weeds. One of the things that many farmers are switching back to is pre-emerge herbicides, but we had some trouble getting them to work in certain parts of the country this year, mainly due to dry conditions. One way around that farmers in the western Corn Belt have found is using a disc kit. When you're doing a tillage pass in the spring, let's say it's with a field cultivator, you can actually put spray nozzles right on that field cultivator. So your herbicide gets sprayed on immediately before it's worked in. This way you get that herbicide down mixed in the soil so it takes less rainfall to activate the herbicide. Also with your tillage, you're wiping out any weeds that are up at that point, so you don't need a burn down either. So you could use something like a Treflan in soybeans, for example, instantly incorporate it and get some pretty good activity on a lot of the Roundup resistant weeds we're fighting. So as we move into more Roundup resistance spreading across the country, look for more disc kits and maybe try them out on your farm to get your pre-emerge herbicide to work more consistently. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
For lower costs and higher production, Mandaco leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving in rocks and has contour conformity equaling zero downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted coulter angles make residue management easier and less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandaco Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandaco dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call 877-915-8790.
Why do more farmers choose Genuity VT Double Pro Rib Complete Corn Blend? For maximum yield protection. With two powerful ways to control above ground insects like corn earworm, corn borer, and fall armyworm. Plus convenient refuge in a bag with 95% traded seed and 5% refuge seed. That's simplicity. That's Genuity VT Double Pro Rib Complete Corn, the #1 choice of farmers.
Case IH set the standard for improving power and fuel economy with SCR technology, while others were still trying to decide what the standard was. Only efficient power from Case IH is proven in the field 10,000 times over. And you'll find it in all our high horsepower equipment, from tractors to combines to sprayers. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready?
I'm ready.
To learn more about how you can be ready with the proven leader, visit caseih.com/efficientpower.
Micronutrients are not optional for plants, they are essential. TJ Micromix is a profit-proven management tool that ensures the availability of essential secondary and micronutrients. Formulated as a dry granule or liquid, TJ Micromix is plant available, easy to mix and apply. The synergistic fertilizer mix delivers consistent yield response on a variety of crops by complementing an NPK fertilizer program. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your fertilizer dealer and get your TJ Micromix today.
Why successful farmers choose Farm Logic.
Farm Logic is a great record-keeping system, but the soil testing just makes it a no-brainer.
I love to be able to have the Farm Logic with me when we're spraying, to where I can put every exact amount of chemicals used.
They can go to the field, enter the records. I can come back to my office and pull up my records directly.
Farm Logic has made a tool that I feel is necessary in my business every day.
What can Farm Logic do for you?
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
Introducing the all-new Backsaver Swing Hopper Auger Mover. Backsavers have interchangeable parts which allows you easy access to move or swing your augers to fit your harvesting needs. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
That's all the time we have for this week's show, but be sure to tune in again next time for another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
No one cares more for the environment than family farmers who plan to pass their land down to their children. These same farmers are working to double yields over the next 15 to 20 years to feed the growing world. To learn how they plan to do it, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.